everyone, welcome back to another Low Code Hour. I'm your host Yulia, and today I am here with Kevin, who is going to show me some amazing stuff. So, hi Kevin, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. How is your day going so far?
It's really not going that badly. Wrote some code, prepped a little workshop that I'm running tomorrow. Ate some mince pies. There are 2 left in the pack. Excellent mince pies, may I add. So yeah, the day definitely could be going worse.
Amazing. What's the workshop you're doing?
It's an internal learn to code workshop. So far we've done kind of web design, HTML and CSS. We've done some browser JavaScript, client-side JavaScript, and tomorrow we are going to touch on Node.js.
Oh, that's amazing. And what about today? What are you going to show me today?
So today I want to show you a platform called Airtable. This is Airtable. And Airtable, it depends who you ask. I kind of describe it as relational databases meet Google Docs. So it's kind of like a nice collaborative online database, and it has some really nifty features. And I thought it was very much in keeping with, or you thought it was very much in keeping with what you do here on the Low Code Hour. So invited me on to talk about it.
Definitely. I wasn't really aware of Airtable crossing the border of low-code tool. I always thought of it as how am I gonna say it? Yes, Google Sheets and a little something on the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, after joining one of your internal workshops, I realized that it's so much more, and I would love to learn more about it and see how that would fit with everything I do day to day. So, yeah, thank you so much again for doing that today.
No worries.
So, I guess can we have a look at Airtable, how one would get started, where to start? Because what I'm seeing on the screen right now might be a bit overwhelming at first. So if you could walk us through.
Absolutely. So I think the way we kind of spoke about doing this is I'll kind of give you a demo of Airtable and people watching the stream. And if you have any questions as we go, being Yulia and or people watching, stop me, ask questions, and we can kind of just spend the next hour and a half just kind of going through them until we run out of time. And if there's still lots of stuff to cover, we can always come back and do it again. So is that still okay?
Definitely, we are coming back.
Sweet. So this is Airtable. This is what it looks like approximately when you sign up, except I clearly already have some documents here. I'm using an account that I normally when I do streams, I use like a demo account, but the community team at Vonage that I'm part of pays for Airtable, which means there's some lovely features that we have access to that you wouldn't necessarily have access to in the free plan. And I'll point out which ones are kind of more, which ones are paid as we go. But it's very, very generous and forgiving to start with. So that's why this isn't an empty blank canvas. So when you start, you come to a page like this, and Airtable has this idea of workspaces. So you have one account and multiple workspaces. Workspaces generally will be teams or big projects or things like that. And within workspaces, you have documents, in Google Drive land, it would be a Sheets document. And here they're called bases. Each workspace you can add people to. So you can see there's a couple of us down here. And when you do like billing stuff, that's done on a workspace level. So hence I'm in this one. So I have access to this workspace that I'll use today. When you get started, you can start from a template or either one that Airtable provide or ones that people can publish. And quite a lot of these are actually bases that I've used in tutorials and blog posts, and I've created templates of and shared them. But we'll start from scratch for the sake of today, and I'll do it down here. So you have some options. You can start with a template. You can import data from like a CSV file, or you can start from scratch, which is what we're going to do. And I'll call this the Low Code Hour. I think this pink's kind of cute. We can pick an icon. I think this is more important than most people appreciate. Hey, there you are.
Oh,
there we are. And we can go into that.
So Kevin, I'm
yes.
gonna stop you right there. You said you would define Airtable as a spreadsheet meets relational database. Now, I'm sure most people are familiar with a spreadsheet, but could you explain the relational database a bit?
Absolutely, I can. So when you launch Airtable, in fact, there's a couple of prerequisites for me talking about relational databases. Bear with me. I've got a couple of little bits I think make sense first. So here we have our base, and our base has these tabs up top. They call them tables, but they visually look like tabs. And the idea is that a tab would be one type of data. So in the context of a blog post that I wrote on the Vonage developer blog, you can have users in one, you can have messages in another. So you have these different data types. Now, in here, you have a table. Looks very similar to what you've probably seen before in a spreadsheet, but every column or field has a particular type. So in this first one, we can only type text. The second one's text as well. It allows you to write slightly longer text, but text nonetheless. This third one's a file. So you upload a file in here. This fourth one lets you pick from one of three options: to do, in progress, or done. And you can go and add more, archive or whatever. You can call it whatever you want. Make it a color. So they have these data types, but this is one form of data. We could call this users, and a user has a name. Delete some of these, I suppose. We can say, avatar. Status is fine. Phone number, for example, could be another. They have a data type for that. So we can insert data in here, and it does enforce a data type. So I couldn't type whatever I want in here. I have to pick from one of the predefined options, which we can then change in the field settings. So we have this table. We can add more if we want, create an empty table, messages, and it starts looking the same, but you can change this if you want. Now, what becomes really useful is you can link data in these two tables together. And that's what makes it a relational database. So we could have a field type. They have it here. They call it link to another record. And we can say for each one of these rows, I want to link it back to a user. This is more useful when I actually put some data in here. And so on. And now over in messages, because these are linked, inside of users, I can select one of the records. Over in messages, I can select one of the users. And it links these two records together. It's a two-way link. So it automatically created the corresponding field here automatically for us. So there's now this kind of two-way link. So from users, I can look at all the messages that are linked to it. From messages, I can look at all the users connected to it. If this had a name, message 1, for example, I linked message 1, and that'll update in just a moment. There we are. So that's it's relational, and you don't just have to do a link between two tables. You could do much more complex links as well. In the context of Vonage Voyagers, which is a program that we run at Vonage to have community members get early access to things we're working on, we use Airtable to kind of manage the application process for that. And yes, thank you for that. So, people apply, and then we send them an exercise. When people submit the exercise, we link it to their application. And then we have an interview with them. We have interview is very formal. We have a chat with them, and we link that to their application. And then when they accept, if we extend an offer to them and they accept that, we link that back to their application as well. And now we have, this application becomes this kind of hub for all these other data types, which are now linked together.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. And then once they're a Voyager, we put on events and we take little notes of who's attended, and that links back to their Voyager record, I suppose. So it's all very intertwined data, but it means that I don't have to repeat data across tables. I can just grab it from one that it's linked to.
it's a bit hard to imagine at first, but yeah.
Yeah, there
I'm
are some
sure.
other. I mean, I can show you another reason why you might choose to link them. If we go over here in messages, for example, message one, or we can make this just a unique ID. So one of the data types is just an auto number. It just gives every record a unique number. We don't need to care too much about it. It's just it will go up one every single time. And we can actually put the message in here. So I can say, wow, I really can't type today, can I?
It's right. It's
We
the
have.
low code error. We drag and drop, not type.
Sorry.
With usually drag and drop, not type. So we're fine.
Oh yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Who needs to type? Robots will take over our job soon anyway. So we have this incoming message, and now that this record is linked to a user, we see that first row is the one that shows. There's another data type called a lookup. And what that does is allows us to grab data from any of the linked records. So we've linked this to a message. That's what this field does. So now we can pull any of the fields from the other table. There we are. There's the message. I can't edit this here. This is a reference. So I can't actually physically go in and change this. It comes from messages.
Would it put all related data in there, or is it like pulling in the data and also filtering it for a certain variable? Yes, you selected the message. So
yeah, so you link it to a table, and then you link it to a field. So if we had another field, this is all very, at this point quite theoretical. We could say, active. Let's say you're an active user, hypothetically. We can pull in the status as well using another lookup record. Pull in status, and now we have that data coming in as well. And I believe it will comma separate them. So if I have multiple messages linked to Kevin, it will show me all of the messages separated by a comma. So that's no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I wasn't gonna. Thank you.
Oh, cool. So we have this notion of a base or a database. Inside of that database, we have tables, which look like these tabs here. Every table has a number of fields, and the fields are the same for every record. One thing you might find if you use something like Google Sheets is it's so freeform that sometimes that can become problematic. Your data starts to look different in different rows, and you have to manage that, and it isn't always an enjoyable experience. At least here, okay, well, when I get the value or set the value of status, it will always be one of these types that has been defined here. It won't let me set it to anything else. I can, of course, add new items, but it kind of helps us do that. That avatar will always be a file. Name will always be text, and so on.
I definitely can appreciate that, because many times I've tried figuring out why timestamp wouldn't show up as I wanted it to. And then just having I guess it's not just constraint, it's the structure that really helps with productivity, I guess, as well.
Productivity, also things like running queries, which I'll show you in a moment, which are like super cool. Showing you just a few more of the data types. So we've kind of spoken about these text ones. We've spoken about linking to another record. Attachment is a file. Checkbox is just that. It can be on or off. Multiple and single select is that they look like the one I showed you, the status. You get a list of options, and in one you can only pick one, and in the other you can pick as many as you want. Collaborator is kind of interesting. This uses your workspace settings. So if this workspace was shared with you, Yulia, I could pick either you or me. So this is all about Airtable users. Dates are kind of cool. And in fact, I want to show you the date. So it gives us the file, the picker as you would expect. But in the settings, you can actually pick a format, which is nice. I think under the hood, it stores it in a standard format. But I like friendly. I think that's quite nice for people who aren't developers. You know,
Yes.
that is not ambiguous to anyone. To your developer types, obviously the one true date format. Oh yeah, sorry, you can't see the drop down here. So we have
I could,
local. Oh, could you? Interesting.
or could I not? No.
No, I don't think you can. We have friendly, US, European, where 11.4 becomes 4.11, or the correct date format.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
I
So we
always
have.
struggle with the European because I'm European, but I've never seen it like that growing up.
Oh, I have. We in school we always did date, month, year. Always that is the way it is done. Date, month, year. Americans do month, date, year, but obviously for what 12 days of every month they could go either way. Like it is, you need to know what format you're following in order to know exactly what date's being shown or contextually understand it. Very, very annoying. But under the hood, it stores it in a standard format, which is useful when we do scripting with Airtable, which I'll show you in a bit. Phone numbers, emails, URLs they are all strings, but they in the UI they'll show you them in specific formats, which is nice. Numbers give you some options. How much precision do you want? Or do you want it to be a whole number or an integer? And do you want to allow negative numbers? Which basically give you the use cases that are common. Number currency is again just a number. You can pick what currency symbol, and I think you can put anything up there. Yeah, it just prepends it. That's useful contextually. What else have we got?
Duration?
Duration allows you to pick a number of hours and minutes. I use this.
Oh.
It might not look that useful, I suppose. You could use it for time tracking. We use it. I use this for organizing a conference as well. Duration is useful for the duration of talks and Q&A and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we have rating, which is basically it's a nice UI on top of a 0 to 5 selector, or a 1 to 5 selector, I should say. And that's stored under the hood as just a number. Right, so the rest of them are more interesting, in my opinion. We already looked at the lookup, where if you've linked this record with a record from another table or the same table, if you've linked it with another record, you can grab fields from that record. Count does kind of what you would expect. So here I can say, I want to count the number of linked records, so messages. So this one has 1 because we've linked it to 1 record. But if there were more messages that matched, that number would increment. We have roll up and formula are the two that I think are most exciting. So formulas, again, very similar to Google Sheets, and in fact use quite a lot of the same formulas, allow you to, at their most basic, add strings together. You collect a first name, you collect a last name, and you can have a computed field that will do first name, space in the middle, last name. And if you want that as a field, it can do things like adding times together. So you could add a time and a duration to find the end time for a particular item. We can do if statements in here. So you can conditionally show one thing if a certain criteria is met, or something else if that is not met. We use this for Vonage Voyagers. When people join the program, there are a set of steps that both we at Vonage and the Voyager need to complete while they're onboarding. Things like signing an agreement. We have to add them to multiple platforms. And so we do that in all of these fields with checkboxes. And then we have a formula that says, well, if all these checkboxes are checked,
right,
they meet a criteria. If not, they are still onboarding. They're active or they're onboarding. Averaging, min-maxing. You can do, you can check multiple criteria with and or, whether something is true or false, and these kind of more.
I'm guessing syntax-wise, it's quite similar to the Google Sheets one, right?
Which one's that? Sorry.
like the syntax, because I see the function name.
Exactly. They provide this nice little pop-up as well. So, we could say if, rating, is greater than 3, then, high scorer, otherwise low scorer. In fact, the syntax is almost entirely borrowed. And again, these are computed fields. You can't actually go in and edit the value of these, nor can you for count.
That's a really helpful one, that you can't edit the calculated ones.
Absolutely. Which means, if there's a problem, the problem is actually in your formula. So then we have, so Lauren in the chat, a nice way to handle those to-dos. It can get so busy and confusing. There is nicer stuff yet for your to-dos. A roll-up will let you, on your fields that you have linked to, so our one here, you can then run kind of aggregate formulas. So I can say, actually, I don't really have a good example here set up. Given all of the names, which are numbers 1, 2, and 3, average them. That's a terrible example. And yeah, it doesn't work in all cases, but it allows you to use all of the linked records and take data from all of them and provide a single value to you. I use that one slightly less, I'll be honest. So at its very core, Airtable lets you throw data in a standardized format, allows you to do little bits of computation on them, which are done automatically for you. One thing I quite like about this, no, I will come back to that. I don't want to jump ahead yet. So what have we covered? Workspaces, this kind of idea of a base, these tables. We've covered fields and the field types and the relationships that you can have between various tables. Do you have any questions, chat, or do you have any questions, Julia, at this point?
I am at this point just amazed by how user-friendly it is.
I could not agree more. And in fact, I was going to not say this till later. This was the thing I just stopped myself saying. Airtable have an API which allows developers to interact with these tables, add data, update data, remove records, stuff like that. And the way I frame Airtable, if you have low quantities of data, because that's one way they do their pricing, you get 1,200 rows at the time of doing this stream per base across all your tables for free. You can have multiple bases, but in one base, you get 1,200 records. So if you're dealing with kind of lower quantities of data up to that point, I actually do advocate for people using Airtable as a database in their code projects, because what this basically is a admin interface that you get given for free that you don't need to build. So your less technical colleagues can still interact and interrogate this data. So, sorry, go ahead.
So I might be wrong, but yeah. Is there a way to see that these tables or database in a different view? Because I see that there is a grid view, and is there a view that shows you how they interact with each other?
Oh, that is not a view. That does exist, and I will show you that very shortly. But we'll do. Oh, there's so much good stuff. I've written just a list of features that I want to talk about. We'll talk about views first. No, we'll talk about these kind of options up here. Then we'll talk about views, and then we'll talk about the feature you're talking about. Oh, there's so much exciting stuff going on. I love Airtable. So now that this data is all in a standardized format, we can start actually interrogating this data, because there is some semblance of data consistency. So let's just use this status as an example. To do these, again, are terrible illustrative examples. I should have thought of something a bit better there. So there are some things we can do straight up here. The first is we can apply filters to this data. So I see now there are 3 records. You can filter against any field, and depending on the data type, the options are slightly different. So we have things like, we can filter where the name contains K, maybe not the best example, where it contains A. My name doesn't contain A, so it's filtered it down to 2 records. So that's strings that aren't that exciting for the sake of filtering. But you could even filter for keywords. See what keywords are coming up. You can not only do does it contain a substring, but also does it not contain? Is it exactly or is it not exactly? Is it empty or not empty? Go ahead.
So if it's an is or is not, that's exactly. If it contains, is that case sensitive?
Ooh, let's find out. No.
Hi, Exy.
Hello. No, it seems to be case insensitive. This kind of contains is not is, a more user-friendly way of using the same terms we would use, right? Contains a substring, we'd use kind of substring as a term as developers, or exactly or equals is what we would say here. But yeah, they try to make it user-friendly. And as long as a developer, you can put these two things together and understand exactly what they mean, it's pretty friendly. We can do other things like status. Is it a particular option, or is it any of? And then you can select multiple.
Oh, that's quite cool.
Yeah. And you can create these filtered kind of views, and it changes what's shown down here. On a similar note, at the bottom of every single field, you can do some summary formulas, I guess. I'm not quite sure what they're called, but we are able to drop this down. And depending on what field type, again, it is, you get some different options. So how many of these are filled? 1. How many unique values are there here? 2. Or how many unique values are there here? 3. And so there are different ones, but it kind of gives you a nice little roll up of the information. So that's filtering. And these kind of summaries. That's it. Didn't need a second word there. Pretty cool. I like filters, and you can add filters together. You can do and or, and you can kind of string them together, which is pretty nifty. And that doesn't actually change your data. It's just running a query and showing you records that match that query. We are not making anything in Airtable today. We are just talking about Airtable and all of the features that it brings. We're probably going to do this over a couple of streams, though not back to back. We'll do the other one at some point in the future. There's scope to build something with it if interested. But we're just talking about it as a tool for low code development and beyond. Is that fair to say, Yulia?
Yes. Well, long story short, I joined one of Kevin's workshops on Airtable, and I found it so interesting that I really had to have him on the stream. So
thank you. And I hope the audience find it interesting as well. So we have filters, then we have groups. So you can group by particular values. So we can say group by status, and now it puts all the to-dos together and all the in-progress values together. Again, it's not actually changing the underlying data. It's not changing the order of these records. It's not changing the values in any of the fields. But it allows you to kind of get an idea of your data when you group it by certain values. The nice thing is you still get these little roll-ups here. So we have, count 1, count 2. So I can see how many. An example of this is I have people sign up to this course that I'm running tomorrow. I'm running 2 different classes at 2 time zones. That's the same content. All their data is in one table because it is the same it's the same data structure. It doesn't need to be split out. And then I can use grouping to kind of get a quick count of how many are in each group, or a filter if I just want to look at data for a particular group. This allows you to group by values that are the same. It doesn't let you do ranges or anything like that. If you'd want to do that, you'd need to create a field with a formula where a value is one thing or the other, and then filter by that if you want to do things like, was it in the last month?
So how much of this filtering and grouping applies to the workspace? As in, if you have a teammate on the same workspace, what are they seeing?
Brilliant. This is the time. This is the time. I'm not going to show this, but you can also sort by fields. Now is the time where we get to discuss this. So if your colleagues have access to the workspace, they can see everything, I believe. I'm not sure there's further. Well, let's see. Actually, I'm not going to hit share because I think it will flash some colleague emails as well, and that isn't fair on them. But they have access to all of it. Where this becomes interesting, however, is the views. Airtable allows you to take this same underlying data structure and create many ways to view it. So let me undo this grouping. So this is just the raw data as it stood at the beginning. I might rename this view, all. This is what I normally do. This is everything. It's every field. There's no special filters, grouping, sorting, nothing. It's just the data as it stands. I can then go and create a new view, and we'll talk about these different options in a moment. And let's say in this view, I only want to show in progress. I can apply a filter, as we previously discussed. So it only shows things that are in progress. And now I can move between these views. It's the same underlying data, but now there is a different way to kind of view that. So you can create as many of these views as you want. Again, in the context of the real world, inside of my course, I have a view just for class A and a view just for class B. It's the same data set. In the context of Voyagers, we have multiple steps of the application. I have a view for every step. I could do that manually every time. I could just apply the filter, look at the data, apply the filter, look at the data. But because I know I'm going to need it more than once, I create a view.
So what I'm getting from this is you're making sort of query templates and saving them that are going to auto-update?
That is a great way of framing it. Yes. Also, can we just laugh at our colleague, the bearded builder himself, at this comment? There's this one guy I work with that I completely don't trust with this. I mean, no one should own that many dungarees. So there are other things we can do with these views, though. We can actually hide entire fields. So we can say, actually, in this view, I don't want to show the phone number. Maybe I don't want to show the linked messages. Maybe I just want to show the name and the status. In fact, you can do it more quickly from this view here. I only want to show the status and the first column that you can't turn off. Now that I've got this filtered view, I can share it. I can create a shareable link that you can share with anyone. When people access that, it is read only.
Oh, okay.
Same data set. They get a limited view. This could already have a filter applied, already have grouping applied. And if that's the case on the shared view in the kind of editing mode that I just showed you, the users who use this view, who use this link, will never be able to see that data. But still, it gives them some light tools to do some own interrogation of the data that they have been provided.
That's a really neat way of sharing data without
Completely
too
agree.
much of exporting and everything. Just enabling, disabling, and
completely agree. And then there are some nice features like you can regenerate the link, so the old one stops working if for any reason people see it. You can make people be logged in with a certain email domain.
and you can embed the view.
You can, yes. And in fact, I know lots of people who do this for resources that they want to share. Resource list, great. Throw it in Airtable. Maybe there's a status that is like approved, unapproved, or pending approval. Only the ones that have been approved. I will answer this question in just a moment. Only the ones that have been approved will show in a view. And then I share that link. Can they export the data? There is this option right here. Allow users to copy data out of the view. And if they do that, I believe they can also export. Let's find out. At the very least, they could physically copy and then paste it into a spreadsheet. But yeah, here we are. Download CSV. But you can turn that off. Obviously, at the point someone sees the data, they can do what they want with it. In reality, even if it's more difficult, yes, they can download that, which is news to me because I've never looked at that before. Yeah. Right. So that is views. Love them. You know, along with the sharing of them, very, very, very nifty. But as you mentioned earlier, or as you asked earlier, are there ways we can present this data in other ways? The answer is yes. There are 4 other view types that Airtable has built in, and then there are further tools that we can talk about afterwards. So this is the grid view. If you are dealing with a data set, this is probably going to be the way you look at data. You can also create a form view. Form views are not terribly interesting. If I say Google Forms to you, it is very similar. The nice thing about this is, the same thing as Google Docs is, as soon as someone submits, it adds an item into this row, into this field, again, into this table. You get some options like making fields required or making fields conditional only if people have answered certain things. You can allow them to select the other record if they fancy. This isn't suitable in all cases. In the context of our team, when we go to events, we get given a little form to fill in afterwards to explain, how that event was for us as individuals and as a company. We could have a table full of all of our team members, and then when people fill in the form, they can select themselves from a list, which then means things like we can count how many items came from each user. Looking at the count field type, we can do things like querying the data, who use certain words in their things and so on. So that's the form view. Yeah, and the nice thing is with the form view is it tries to respect the formatting as well. So if you're saying currency, I can only put a number in here. I can't put text in.
That's amazing. I remember the times when we tried to make sense of the event reports at the end of the year, and then how many people have heard of company before, like about half, except I was expecting a percentage, so now I'm going through the data sheet to convert everything to percentages.
Yeah, and this would help with that. Just like Google Forms, you also get you can add some help text in here. The kind of basic things you would expect. Not every field needs to exist in the form. So let's say status. Status is probably not something you would want external people to fill in. That's something for you. So status still exists on every record, but when the user fills in the form, they can't access it. They can't change it, which is quite nice. Another thing which I quite like when I compare this with Google Forms is this field here is for the field called question is for the field called duration. If we go over to here, it's called duration. But we can make the question, we can call it whatever we want, how long was it? This is such a tiny little thing. I'm not even sure if it is still the case in Google Forms, but when you change the text in questions in the resulting spreadsheet, the question becomes the header, and you end up with this but here you can decouple what gets shown to users and what field that actually inserts data into. Again, a small thing, but I like it. You can also create multiple forms as well. So, sorry.
Multiple forms as in?
It's multiple forms for the same view, and you for the same table. And you may ask why. I don't understand the use case. There is a real use case that we use this for. So again, back to the Vonage Voyagers program, there are 2 routes that people can come into the program through. They can apply or they can nominate someone.
Oh, I see.
So the nominations are a separate data type. We ask a different table. We ask different questions. But when people accept their nomination, we basically are collecting the same information from them. So we create another table in the applications table, but the context is different. It says, accept your nomination. The way we frame questions, the words are slightly different, but ultimately it inserts data into exactly the same table because that's useful to us. It's the same data structure. So that's how we use that. You can have multiple forms. Yes, brilliant. Yes, I use multiple forms for the same grid or the same, the data view that's just a table. One is for sign up and fills in certain info. And then based on that, I send them another form with more detailed questions that suit choices they made on the sign up form. Exactly. You can also pre-fill fields based on the URL that you share with people. So the way we do that is when someone creates a nomination, it gets a unique ID, and that Airtable generates that for us. And then we pre-fill that value into the first question in the accept your nomination. We call it a nomination token. But it means that we can directly link that nomination with that acceptance. And when you select fields from another table, you can also limit it to a view. So if you had more than one view, you can say only allow them to select records in a certain view. And we've created a view only for records that haven't yet been linked to an application. So that means that a nomination token can only be used once. Like you physically can't use that nomination token more than once. Very useful. So that's forms. Kind of acts as you would expect. Yes, records can be added via the API. Yeah, they can. You can kind of do all the CRUD operations you would expect. You can create records. You can read, fetch, or get records. You can update records and delete them using the API, which makes it a completely viable database. Though there are some limitations around security, which I'm sure we can talk about when we get into mentioning the API. So that is grids, that's forms, and that's most of what people will use. Like most people probably won't expand into the others. One of them, the calendar, you have to specify a date type field. So it has to have a date type. But once you do that, it will plot them all onto a graph. So this table here had a date. So it gets plotted straight here onto a calendar view.
So I'm guessing it works more when you're working with event
dates.
Type of things. Yes.
Yeah, or to-do list. You could do due dates, and then you could plot them onto a calendar at either a month view, a week view, 3-day view, day, 2-week, and so on. So you could use it for your to-do items, Lauren. This is a way of representing this data. Yeah, I don't really have much. Hello, good evening.
Today we are learning Airtable with Kevin, so stay tuned for that. Sorry for interrupting, Kevin.
No, that's quite all right. It's your show. Interrupt as much as you need to. The gallery view it basically turns each record into a little card like this, and you can pick what fields are shown on that card. So you might choose, show the phone, show the date, show the status, and don't show a cover field because that isn't appropriate. It's another way. You might use this for things like team profiles, project overviews. If you have multiple projects at Hackathon, for example, for submissions, you could show them all like this. I'm not a huge fan of this view. There is a lot of physical screen space being used up for very little actual data, but some people would possibly appreciate this more.
I'm sure there are use cases where
absolutely and with all of these, not the form so much, but with the calendar, you can also apply a filter. So all of this, all this functionality extends. So I can say, only show me where the status is in progress. If that is, again, useful for this, and then you can share this again.
So for the form, I was under the impression that you would use that to collect the data.
Exactly. So you could do things like, you're a mentor at a community group, put your data in here to, fill in your profile. That data goes into this table, and we can then create a gallery view, and that gallery view automatically will get the new data that comes in. You could do stuff like that.
So my confusion was you wouldn't use the form view to view the data.
No,
you would use that to collect.
You're absolutely right. Out of those 5 views, the form is a little bit of an outlier in that the rest of them present the data, and yes, the form allows you to insert data. Sorry, I misunderstood. You're absolutely right. The final view that might be useful, and actually the one that for the to-do question might be better, is a Kanban view or a Trello card view, if that helps you visualize it differently. You have to pick either a single select field or a collaborator field. You can create a new one when you create a Kanban view. We'll use the status, and there you are. This data is now instead plotted in this, and the order of the columns is based on the order of the options, in the field. So to do, in progress, done, and archived in that order. You can always reorder them. And once again, you can change what's visible on the card. There we are.
So would you be able to move certain fields over?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Like that, yes, like
yes,
that.
absolutely. And what that's actually doing in the background is exactly the same as if in the grid view I did the drop down and I changed status to done.
That's amazing.
That field now has done. And again, you can expand it as long as you're logged in. So again, once again, you could share this view. You could choose to redact certain information. Maybe we have notes and we don't want to share the notes with this person who we're sharing the view with. So we make sure that's not on the card. We provide that link. And now we just have this basic view here. Oh, you can see the hidden fields. All right, ignore me. I'm sure there is a way to do this. I'm sure there is a way to do that. Again, you can apply filters, sorts, change which field this is being created by, and so on. So they're the 5 views. Between all of those, I think they're pretty sensible. I can't think of many other ways I'd want to look at this data in a structured way, at least.
No, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, it is.
I am very much impressed, and we're about halfway through it.
Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, what should we spend the rest of our time on? There is a whole other part of Airtable called the Airtable platform, which are these little buttons up here that we can absolutely show today, or we could save, or we could show in a more basic capacity today and then expand on. But that, at its core, that's kind of, before you get all these nice fluffy additional power user features, that's kind of Airtable. You have data in bases have tables have one or more views, and views can then have, you called them query templates. I think that's a very good way of framing them, and different visual ways of presenting that data as well, that you can then share a read-only link to.
To be honest, I've always struggled with databases, even back in uni, because of just the way they are presented. And I'm more of a visual person, and this is extremely helpful. And I think that's a really solid, powerful base. So we'll be using more Airtable going on.
Yeah, I really like it. So let's talk for a moment about what you pay for. So everything I've shown is available to every user, with the side note that you're limited on the number of rows in your base. So you get 1,200 right now, as far as I'm aware, for free. So this would count as 3, 4, 5, 6. And so you could have 1,200 across all of your tabs in this one base. And then you would hit the limit and you'd have to pay. So just be aware of that. Everything else, though, is there. So all the different view types, linking tables together, the filtering, the grouping, the sharing, read-only views, that's all there for free. Using the API is there for free as well. We could talk maybe briefly about the API, and then we can get onto these.
Yep, let's have a look at the API. And in the meantime, if you can think about, I'm sure you already know, but if you can tell us what's your favorite thing about Airtable, that would be a good start. Also, if anyone is in the chat using Airtable, we would love to know what you like about it, or a certain feature that you would like other people to try.
Was that a question for me to think about as well?
No.
That
Well,
was the
you
chat. I
could.
was like, yeah. I was like, all of them. I could probably pick one. So if you go to airtable.com/API, it will show all of your bases available to you across all of your workspaces. So this is the one we created today. And it actually generates API docs specifically for this base. So it will show you examples with all the information in this base. Every base, for example, has this unique identifier for it. And I think it injects that into these little snippets that will show up on the right. Some other notes before I scroll down there, you can use it just by, firing off HTTP requests. So anything that can make an HTTP request can interact with the API. They also have an official JavaScript SDK, Airtable.js, and then a couple of community ones in Ruby and .NET. Their docs also allow you to check this box and show your API key in the examples. So the examples, you can just copy and paste to test them out. You shouldn't share that API key, so I am not going to show them to you. And before I show you the API, this is probably the point where I tell you the other real shortcoming of Airtable, which is you can generate an API key for your account. Obviously, you shouldn't share that with people. It is only a single key. It's not like a two-parter, a key and a secret, or there's no, key-based authentication that is, a file-based authentication or anything like that. No, that. But that one API key has read-write admin access for your entire account. So what that means is, what I would expect, or what I would hope, is that you'd get a different maybe key or secret per base or per workspace. So, I can use my workspace over here, and I've got a little side project or a workshop, that's fine. I can use this new key here. All right, someone sees it, it's not really a big deal. I can get rid of it later. You can obviously regenerate your key if you think people have seen it, but that one single key gives entire access over everything. So the same way that my key gives people access to the low code hour, or my application's access to the low code hour base, which I wouldn't really care if people saw, it also gives them access to Vonage Voyages and, my course material and other stuff that I may not want others to see. So I think that is an unfortunate real shortcoming when compared to more mature databases that have better models for security. So that was I wish they'd fix this.
That's a really good point. Oh, and yeah.
So when you take a look through the API docs, I won't go through it in great depth, but for every table, they generate these. And if you update the fields or the field types or the options in the selects, things like that, and you refresh this page, they will be represented here as well. You can see actually our 3 data points here from the 3 records. I think that's really nifty as a set of API docs.
Yeah,
I really like them.
The reason I went a little quiet over here for the past couple of minutes was because I was amazed by how the docs are generated based on your data, so that you no longer have to look at the docs, you can look at your data and try to figure out how to work with those. You have your own examples in there. So
yeah. And
back to the user experience.
I agree. So they firstly show you all the fields and what data types you can expect. This string name, well, that's going to be, here are the example values. They're a string. Avatar is an attachment. Now, this always comes back as an array because you can actually upload more than one image to that field. And every object in that array will ultimately, it's all this information. It could contain the image at multiple sizes if you fancy, but it also can just give you the direct URL just to the image. So that's kind of cool. I use this for hosting some files and then getting them in my web pages programmatically, because it gives me a direct URL. So it kind of acts as a hosting service in that regard. Enter another limitation of free Airtable. It's not even a limitation, it's just a lower amount of storage per base. I think it's like 2 gigs for free, as opposed to 20 gigs if you pay. And I think it goes up depending on how far up the tiers you go, but that's fine for many use cases.
Definitely, especially when getting started for a project or something.
Absolutely. Status is a string. Phone numbers have to come in this format, which is useful to know. Now, when you link records together, you have to use the record ID. This is a value generated by Airtable, hidden from your average user, but it generates and maintains this unique identifier for each row. But when you're dealing with the API, you have it exposed to you, so you can see it. As it happens, you can actually get it in the UI as well, and you can access it using a formula. There's a formula called record ID, and the value of that is the unique identifier. So, if you do want to actually have a reference to it in the UI, you can create a field for it.
So would a record be a single line in a single table?
Correct. That is one record in the users table. Sorry, that was a database terminology thing. Yes, one row, record, document. Airtable refers to them as records. Hello, Marco. So it shows you all of these. It shows you all of these items and in what data structure you should expect to send or receive. And then it shows you how to list all your records. So when you initialize the library, you give it your API key and your base ID. The base ID is here, but it was also at the top of this page. And you select the table and you can select, and it will bring back all of the records for you. And using the API, you can also do things like only show me the first many records, only show me records from a certain view, which means you can already have filters applied, or you can apply filters directly within one of these parameters as well. So even if you don't have a view for it, you might choose to implement that inside of this options object. You get all the records back as an array, and then you can do whatever it is you fancy with it. You can also, so that's getting records, then like listing them. To retrieve an individual, yes. Sorry.
Did you ever find yourself with the need of having to get a certain view programmatically because you couldn't find in the dashboard what you were looking for?
Oh, interesting. Never, because I can't find it in the dashboard. I think the UI, Airtable is plenty easy to use if I'm just trying to interrogate data. But if I've built entire applications on this, one that I think we're just using at an event for the first time today, the Video API Challenge, and we generate pages of that website based on Airtable data. So I filter when using that just to limit the amount of data that's going to come back into my application. So you can use things like filter by or order by depending on which database driver you're using in database technology. Not in Airtable though. You use for filter and order, you would provide those as options inside of this object here. So then we have getting an individual record. Now, when you get an individual record, you need to provide the specific row ID. So just be aware of that. If you create a record, you can go name of table .create, and you can either pass in an array with multiple objects with the data structure provided at the top of this docs page, or you can send a single one up. So there's this kind of option here to toggle between the two examples. You can just throw up a single object if you're just doing one. So that's
Sorry, the toggle was a little fast in between those two. So either a single object that we have up right now,
or an array with more than one object, or one or
array.
more, I should say.
Okay.
An array, sorry, yes. You can do multiple. And it's and you can do up to 10 at a time.
Okay, that's
And that's
all for
mentioned
me.
here. So what have we done? Listing, getting a single one, creating them. The other two I'll go through a bit quicker. You can update one or more records. When you update records, you need to know their ID as expected. And then and that the way that works is you name the fields that you want to alter and then you value, and it'll update just those fields. Sometimes when you do updates with certain database drivers, they replace the whole record by default. This doesn't. By default, it'll only change what you want. They do also have, and they explain it really nicely here in the docs, they also have a replace, and replace will do that. It will replace the entire record. But update will just update the fields that you provide. So if I didn't provide name would stay the same. And just to be clear, the fields that you can't edit in the UI, like the formulas, the lookups and things like that, you also can't do through the API. It will give you a fairly decent error back to explain.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah. And then finally, delete. Destroy. They say delete here, but they say destroy here. Anyway, you provide one or more IDs and it's gone. Goodbye.
That would be the whole record gone.
The whole record's gone. So that's the API. They also provide a decent list of all the errors that you might encounter and what they mean. It's fairly competent.
So you cannot change the ID of the record, right?
Correct. And that's being asked here. Yes, the ID is like the fields we looked at earlier, like the counts, the formulas, the lookups, where the lookups, they are not editable. They are computed fields, so you wouldn't be able to edit those. And I'm fair. I wonder if it tells us that. Let's take a look. If we look at, it doesn't explicitly say that here, but you can't update it. It may say it where we update records. Okay, here we are. Values for these 4 fields are automatically computed by Airtable and cannot be directly updated. You cannot clear these even with a replace call.
Right, thank you.
So that's the API in a nutshell. You can use this to get data into Airtable or basically use it as a full-on database for your applications. In my very first blog post I wrote when I started at Vonage, I built when you get a text message in, it stores it in Airtable, and it does that via the API.
We did something similar with Lorna last month.
Yeah,
I believe it's Zapier integration.
Yes, you can use it with Zapier as well, and I feel like we should probably mention that before the end of our time today. But what am I looking for? Log SMS Airtable. We are save incoming. Wait, this isn't right. This is something else. Airtable. You can actually take bases that you've made and publish them for other people to copy straight into their account with all of your views set up, all of your fields set up correctly. And this is the accompanying Airtable for this tutorial, and the tutorial is here. So yeah, save inbound SMS. So what we did here was when a message came in, we checked if the number already was saved. If it wasn't, we created a new numbers entry. And regardless of whether that's the case, we then store the message and we link it to the number. So you can see how many messages you got from a particular number in this view very easily. And we did that again with the, if I scroll down a little, with the same API that we looked at together. When we get a text message in, we create a new message, which is just throwing up that object. There we are. Okay, that's the API. So I feel like we've done quite a lot. And apart from the API, we still haven't spoken about the other features in the Airtable platform. How are you feeling about doing that now, or we could save that?
I feel like we could definitely come back another time and do a deep dive of those
I
features because
agree.
there's so much to talk about. If you wanted to give us a little preview of what we're gonna
I
do,
would
just
love that.
to
I would love
see
that.
what other things are in there.
Airtable had a feature called Blocks, which still exists. They recently renamed it into Apps. Apps are a paid feature, so just be aware of that. And these are additional functionality that you can add to your base. One of them is actually exactly what you described, built by Airtable themselves, the base schema. So if we install that there, we can actually get a visual interface of how all of these. Oh, look at that. That's funky, isn't it? There we are. How all of these fields and tables interact.
That is exactly what I had in mind.
Yes. So they
Well,
do have
not
that if that's useful.
that is exactly what I did not have in mind, but I really wanted to see, so thank you.
Yeah, no worries at all. So they have that. And the way this works is just like the views, you can create views for these, what they call dashboards. So you could create a dashboard that's everything to do with Voyager's applications. You could make a dashboard for everything to do with the nominations and everything to do with once they are already a Voyager. And you can add multiple apps to each one of those. So very much the same kind of idea. There are loads of things you can do here, though. You can generate PDFs and inject data from Airtable. In fact, this little illustration here is perfect. You design the layout and you can put, you can put the Airtable variables basically directly within it. Very, very cool. Very cool. When I ran my last business, I actually used this to do exactly this, generate invoices. And then I can track whether or not they've been paid through Airtable status columns, as we saw.
That's amazing.
So that is the page designer. There's loads more. There's third-party integrations with Jira, with things like Typeform. In fact, they recently opened this up with a software development kit and SDK so developers can create their own. So there's loads in here. Batch updating records. Edit JSON. So if you're storing JSON in like a text field, this gives you a nicer way of being able to edit that JSON. Adding a map. Oh, wow, there's so many here.
So it's both integrations with different other products and more complex things you can do.
Exactly.
And I find it really similar to... I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, go.
I find it really similar with the Zapier dashboard.
Yeah, it is actually. Wait for Zapier because they Airtable basically released something when they released the Airtable platform, which included the Blocks SDK or this Apps SDK. They released something that looks even more like Zapier than you probably are expecting. So you can do these blocks. There's one that's really nifty though, which is the scripting block. And with the scripting block, you can write code that runs against your Airtable records. It just uses client-side JavaScript. So an example of something that we use this for is people put in their initial applications to be a Vonage Voyager. We look at it, and if we want to like send them the exercise, I've created a script called send exercise. It takes in a record. It looks at their email. It sends them an email using an email API, and then it updates their record it updates their status to the fact we've sent them an exercise and logs the current date so we know when we did it. And it does all of that through one click because I wrote it as a script. So, and I use just JavaScript browser fetch in order to make the API call. So it's a familiar interface to do that. And the scripting block in particular is free for a few months yet. So if you wanted to play around with it, by all means. So that's a little teaser for apps. We can look more at that at another time. This other tab here is one that I haven't spent much time on. It's called automations. Now, you mentioned Zapier. Get a load of this. You choose a trigger. The trigger can be stuff in Airtable, like you've entered a view, a record is updated, created, or matches a condition. Or you can link it with third-party like platforms. At the moment, they are supporting the G Suite tools. So when something happens in the linked Google Calendar account and something happens in Google Sheets or Forms, because sometimes you still want it to live in Google Forms, but then you're going to want it in Airtable. So you set up a trigger when a record is created in the users table, run test.
Yes, that is oddly familiar.
It does look familiar, doesn't it? You can add an action, and that action could be sending an email, updating another record, running a script, which is where this becomes really useful because you can combine this with your own code knowledge, your code logic using scripts, sending a message in Slack, email, and posting a tweet, and so on. I could see the posting tweet being an interesting way to do things like your team could submit, someone from your team or community could submit a tweet that they want to be posted. And then once you approve it and it enters a view or it meets a condition, you post the tweet. That could be kind of cool. So yeah, that's automations. I've not played with them at all because they kind of came out after I did a bunch of like setting Airtable up for some projects. I'm not sure if they would have been that useful anyway. And then finally, there is a field type called button. This came out at the same time. And with a button, you can run a script. And what that will do is it will pipe this record, if I pressed it on this record, directly into a script. So this is how we do the voyages. In every Voyager record, there's a bunch of buttons: send, exercise, reject, approve, stuff like that. And the button is on the row itself. You press the button. The script, I've set up a little check, like, are you sure you want to do this? You've got it correct. This is what you wanted. Yes, brilliant. Fire off an API call to send an email, update the record. And yeah.
That's amazing. So this is, well, for the past couple of minutes, I've been already thinking it, but this is definitely what makes it a low-code platform for me.
Absolutely.
Like fully fledged low-code platform.
Absolutely. And the thing I love is you could combine this with their scripting block and basically open it up to do whatever you want. The easy example is, our team they have like an email integration, but we use a different platform that has an API, and I can still automate with Airtable sending emails. We do it on a trigger because that's what we want, but it doesn't have to be on a trigger. It doesn't have to be automated. Like I can press a button and trigger the script, and then I can integrate with anything I want. One of their integrations was with a platform called Clearbit. I've never used it before, but my understanding is that it's basically like you give them an email address and it will scour the database and tell you more about the person who owns that email. Using that, you can enrich your data set. Equally, you could go off to any third-party platform and do stuff with their data. So I really, 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 really like it.
That's a lot to take in, but I am so grateful that you walked us through it, and I can't wait until next time to find out more about the automations and apps. I feel like we can do some fun things around those.
I completely agree. As through automations, apps, and maybe also a little sprinkling of something like Zapier already, or a little serverless thing, we can maybe build something next time using apps and automations as the kind of heart.
Definitely. So, have you thought about what your favorite thing about Airtable is?
Was that to the chat or me again?
You first.
Picking one thing is difficult. I would say I just really like having fixed data types, but that are still flexible. You can add them, remove them, change them. Having fixed data types for a field in a way that is friendly for people who aren't developers, which in turn allows you to do the filtering, the grouping, the sorting, the views, the things like that. But it all underlies having, data that you can rely on more than if it was just a free-form spreadsheet.
And what would be the thing that you use the most often?
The thing is nebulous. It depends how low level you get. I use their API all the time. I think this is a great data store. Not all of our team are developers, but it means they can get a really good look in on the data, and I can just treat it like a database. And I haven't had to build an admin interface or any interface to allow them to run queries or anything. They can just do that. So I would say, yeah, just using it as a database, even without all the special features, is probably what I use most often. The scripting block is also kind of cool, but I only have a few use cases for it, but it is very nice to have it.
So that was the nice thing you touched on with using the tool as a team, where you would have technical and less technical people as well. I find it challenging with most low-code or no-code tools to satisfy both your mainstream developer
Absolutely.
and someone who is more looking for no-code, low-code tools. Would you say Airtable is a nice middle ground where both of these users would be happy?
I absolutely do, as long as you're on the development side, you're not building applications that will hit their API rate limit, that will use a ton of rows, because that's one of the criteria for having to pay for it. And you're okay with just having that single API key for authentication. If those criteria are acceptable, then absolutely.
That's amazing. Thank you.
How are we doing on time? I think we're starting to draw towards the end, right?
Yes, I feel that way, but nobody panic, because we will have Kevin back, and that will be, I believe, on the 16th of December.
I will take your word for it. That is a date. It sounds like a date we may or may not have agreed. I'm sure we did.
I have a ticket for it, so we have a done deal.
It's happening.
It's definitely happening. So looking forward to that, and thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me today.
It's been really fun. Thank you.
I am a convert now. I don't know what I'm getting into,
nifty.
But it looks promising and so user friendly. Why didn't I start earlier?
I know, right? My team joke that I try every problem we have, I'm like, we can fix that with Airtable. Oh, we want to, send out emails to a bunch of people after an event. You could use built-in tools in emailing services to do that. But you know what I built? I built a thing in Airtable to do it.
That's really cool. Well, it can do it. It really is intuitive, well, from my first impression. But hopefully next time I can speak more about my experiences with it, because I'm definitely giving this a go. And hopefully I can prepare something on the automation side.
That'd be really cool. It's the side that I have not really touched. I must add, before we go, there is one final part of Airtable platform that I have had zero need to use and don't know how it works, because I've never had a need to use it. So their Airtable platform, I think the frame comes in 4 parts: the apps, the automations, the API, and then finally there is, I think, what they call synced tables, where one of my tables here could actually be from another base. So you can kind of bring data in across data, like cross database. I don't understand why you would do that, as opposed to maybe there's permission-based things, like I will allow you to see this table in this space, but you don't have access to. I don't really know, but they have this thing called synced tables or synced bases or something like that, and I still don't really know how they work. So that and automations are the bits of the platform that I've not really played with.
I could possibly see that working across 2 companies, sharing some sort of data.
I mean, why don't we look? They call it synced Airtable sync. You can sync records from one source space to another. So this deliverables table is over here, and then you can also access it over here. But I don't really. Oh, I mean, you could give people. Oh, I know why. So permissions, you can use permissions in Airtable. Obviously, there's several levels: admin, editor, which means you can read, write, only read, stuff like that. Those permissions, you can add people to a workspace. You can also add them to an individual base and not others. So this is probably a way of giving people access to some data over in this space that you don't have access to, but pulling it into this one. I don't really see it. Like, I don't really get how useful it is. Oh yeah. Oh no, this is another way. You could have a single source of truth for things like your team or employees, and then use that data in a bunch of different bases.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's probably its value. Yeah.
All right.
Coolio.
So I suppose then we will be focusing more on the absent automation side next time, as opposed to this one.
Absolutely.
Right. So next week, not next week, in 2 weeks' time, same time, 3 p.m. GMT, not British Summer Time, because that's over. I'll be back with Lorna, and we're going to do something a bit similar, not as cool, possibly, in Postman. That is going to be really cool as well. Not as complex. Different tool, different applications. And I got all wrapped up in there. Anyway, thank you, Kevin, for joining me today.
Thank you.
This has really been amazing, and I can't wait for the next time.
Brilliant. So, neither can I. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, see you here in 2 weeks' time. Bye.